Hello there guys, welcome to Yo Sakura. This video is basically a crash course through Adobe Illustrator. It's going to show you most of the options and tools which you need to know to get started with working within Illustrator. The reason I've created this video is so that it is a primer for the other course which I wanted to do, which is how exactly I went about creating the Yo Sakura logo within Illustrator itself. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the different ways in which you can create objects, manipulate objects, grouping, clipping, isolating objects, effects, units, and all sorts of things within Illustrator. So I really hope you find this video useful. So let's get started. So here I'm in Illustrator. This is the default screen in Illustrator as soon as you open it up for the first time. I have no canvas or no new document open within it. So if your Illustrator does not look exactly like this, if you want to follow along exactly, you can go ahead to the top right corner here, and here in the drop down list set it to Essentials. So the interface should look like this. If it still does not, go down and tell Reset Essentials. It basically goes ahead and resets the entire interface so that it looks exactly the way mine interface does right now. So now once you have that set up, let's go ahead and create a new document where we get started. Now to create a new document, you can directly go ahead to File and tell New, or default the shortcut is Control-N. I'm not going to touch any of these options here. We are going to come back to canvas settings, unit setups, and everything by the end of the video. So now here we have the default canvas, new document open within Illustrator. We have the name for the document, and now let's get started. First thing people want to know, how exactly do you create objects? Well, if you want to create objects, first thing you have to remember is that all object creation tools are in the second panel here in the toolbox. So if you want to create objects, this is where you have to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and start creating default objects. So default objects are basically what I call the circle or rectangle and things as such. So let me go ahead and open up this dialog box, this pop-up from inside this, and by clicking on this side pull away panel, I can bring out this entire box. So as you can see, I have different options. I can create rectangles, I can create rounded rectangles, ellipses, polygons, stars, and whatnot. So now I'll go ahead and first show you the different options you have while creating these objects. Now I have the rectangle tool, and if I go ahead and directly click and drag, you can see I create two different corner points. So the first click created the top left corner, and the bottom click, the last click created the bottom right. It could be any way. I can just click and drag it in any direction and it goes in that particular direction. So you can go ahead and create rectangles the same way, but Illustrator has any package, gives you loads of shortcuts and options. So let's see a couple of those. I'm just going to go ahead and undo the creation of this. That's basically Control Z, undo. I'm going to undo both of the operations, and now when I'm going to click and drag this rectangle, I'm going to press and hold Shift key, and as you can see, when I'm dragging this, the width and height indicator right next to my cursor is showing me the exact same values. I'm not able to change the shape of this rectangle from a square. So basically holding Shift constrains the width and height and gives me a particular perfect square. So this is the help, this is what the Shift key does. If you're instead going to use the Alt key, you can see immediately there's a huge change. Alt key basically goes ahead and tells wherever you clicked the first, where you made the first click, that's where the center of the object is going to be. So let's say I wanted the center of the object to be in the center of the canvas. While I move my mouse, you can see there is a green text which tells center, and there is an X mark in the center. I'll go ahead and click and drag. By default, it creates one corner point in that particular center, but instead holding Alt puts that as the center of my object itself. Now using multiple shortcuts like Shift at the same time, you can see that I can create a complete square starting from that center. So these are the two shortcuts which are quite useful while creating this. Similarly, if I go to the sphere, it follows the same shortcuts. Clicking and dragging follows the bounding objects or the bounding box of the sphere. Toholding the Shift key makes sure it's a perfect sphere. Holding the Alt key sends the sphere to the center point, or the first click as a center point. Holding both of them together creates a sphere with the first click as the center point. So these are the basic default options. So let me go ahead and delete these objects. Now similarly, if you are going to create any of the other options, you can go ahead and while creating, press the arrow keys, up and down arrow keys, to change the number of sides. Like on this polygon tool, I'm using the up and down arrows on my keyboard to create different sides. So you can easily go ahead and change these options. You can use shift to constrain the exact size or the angle in this case, and alt to change the exact position. So actually alt does not seem to work with this because it is being created from the center. So that is for the polygon. And similarly for the star, I can go ahead and create that. I can go ahead and use my arrow keys on the keyboard to change the values for that. Come to the rounded rectangle, I can do the same. I can use the up and down arrow keys to change the roundness of my rounded rectangle. So like this, I can go ahead and create different of one of these tools. And obviously I have this flare. I have no clue how many people actually make use of this flare, because I personally have never actually made use of it in any of my projects. So this is basically creating different objects. Now we created these objects, but as you can see, these basically are empty, these are blank. And as you can see, the fill and the outline for these are basically blank, white and black. So this is the color combo which you have for the objects itself. So if I want to change the color of any particular object, like let's say this object which I have selected, I can go ahead and click on the fill, which is the object which is the color swatch which is completely colored, or I can go to the outline, which is the one which only shows you the outer boundary and not the insides, and give the particular color. So let me go to the fill and double click. It gives me the color dialog box, and I can choose any color I want and hit OK. And this basically gives me the fill color. And now I can go to the outline and tell what color I want for the outline. Now because the object is so small, or I have zoomed out so much, I can't really see the outline color. So let me give a very contrasting color so that when I zoom in, you can see the actual color itself. So as you can see, the outline and fill colors have been applied to the object. So this is one of the easiest ways to apply outline and fill colors. Apart from that, you can also go ahead and tell you want to shift the outline and fill color, basically swapping the different colors. So now as you can see, the colors are swapped. You can do this any number of times you want, obviously. Apart from this, you can see that there's a small swatch here which is basically the black and white colors which were default. If you have selected an object and click on this, you basically get the default white fill with a black stroke outline. Now let us say you do not actually want an outline on an object. So what do you do in such a case? You can go ahead and make sure the outline is the active swatch, which means outline should be on top of the fill. You can see that I can shift outline and stroke or fill using by just clicking on them. Now once the stroke is active, I can click none, and by doing that you can see the stroke is gone. The fill actually exists, and to see that I can put this object on top of another one. So I'll just take this and give it a different color so you can see what's happening. So you can see this object which has white fill is blocking the other object, so it does have fill. Now let's say instead I only wanted the outline but no fill. So in such a case, I'll come to the outline, I'll give it a particular color. So let's say I give it a black color, and now to the fill I tell none. So you can see it has only the outline but no fill this time. Similarly, you can go ahead and give a gradient instead of a fill. So now you have a gradient option. You can go ahead and choose the different gradient options you want. You can tell you want a radial or linear gradient. If you want other options for this tool, you can go ahead, choose a gradient tool over here and change the angle and all such details for this tool. So I'm not going to go too deep into this tool. As you can see, it's quite self-explanatory. You can go ahead and try to figure it out for yourself. Now once this is done, let me say that I really want to choose different colors. I want a big swatch. As you can see, there's a huge color swatch over here. I can go ahead and pick any color I want, and it basically gets filled. I can shift it over to the outline and now fill in any color, and it fills the same color to the outline. As you can see, by changing it here, I can easily change the colors there. Now the way you can shift between these is using a simple shortcut, which is X on the keyboard, and it changes you from fill to outline. So when you're working directly in Illustrator, you don't have to come here and keep switching between the outline or fill options when you're picking colors. So that was creating objects and adding fill and stroke to the object itself. Now if you want to change any of the options, like let's say you want to give particular colors and you want swatches for that, you have all those options here on the top bar. If you want to change the size of the stroke too, you have all such options. You have different things you can just go through here on the top, and you'll see all of them. Now that was basically creating objects. Now let's me just show you one other option, which is basically the opacity. When I'm going to show you how I created the logo, I'll show you how I make use of opacity majority of the times to see exactly how I want to place different objects. So by giving different opacities, you basically make an object transparent. So as you can see, this white object is basically sitting on top of the transparent object, so I'm not able to see this exactly. So I'll show you one method in which I can bring objects back and forth. Basically, I'm changing different layers or ordering of objects, and this layering or ordering can be done in the layer palette, which you can see is over here on the side. I'll just go ahead and toggle all of my panels on the side to be open, so you can see all these options. I just want to show you the layers options for now. Now if I toggle open the layers option, you can see I have path and another path. You can see if one is the blank one and another is the default green and purple. Okay, it's kind of hard to see, so let me just go ahead to the panel options. I'll just tell I want it to be large, so you can see a little bit more about what's happening. Actually, let me go ahead and tell I want it to be really large. Okay, maybe a little bit more. So as you can see, you can make use of all the options which you have within Illustrator to see exactly what's going on. So now this is the layer. Think of layers as different files in which you can put in different sheets of paper. So in this, what it's telling me is that this green and pink paper which I have, or this image which I have, is at the bottom of the white paper, because of which the white paper is obviously covering this one. So instead, what I can do is just select this object and drag and drop it on top of it. So as you can see now, immediately I have this green object which is basically sitting on top of this white object. Let me go ahead and apply a different color on this white object so you can see what's happening. As you can see, this object is transparent and it's covering this object on top. Now as you can see, this transparent object is covering this on top. But if you are familiar with software like Photoshop, you know that this is not the only way of blending two objects together. In Photoshop, you have something called blend modes. You can multiply, screen, and use all such blend modes on objects. If you want to do the same in Illustrator, you can come down to the transparency tab, and here you can change the blend mode to anything you want. So let's say I want to darken it. As you can see, the blend mode is changed, it's darkened. You can multiply it, you can go ahead screen it, or do any one of the options here till you get the result that you are looking for. Now let's say I didn't want the opacity. I can still remove all of the opacity, make it completely opaque, and still have a kind of a way to look through the object to see exactly what's behind it. This is one of the most important features I really like in Illustrator compared to other graphic programs, vector graphic programs, because even though it's using all the blend modes and opacity and all such options, it's quite fast. So try to leverage these features in Illustrator and try to get it to do whatever you want. Now another thing to note, as you can see, if I select this object, the outline is actually here in the center. This is the actual object itself. This is the width and height of the object, whereas my outline actually is going beyond and in the entire object. Let's say you do not want it. You want the outline to be exactly inside or outside the object. All such options can be found under stroke, and here as you can see, there are a couple of options where you have this arrow marks on the side. By clicking on this, you can expand or collapse the entire tabs. So this is all the options which are available in the stroke panel. Now what I will tell is I can align the stroke either inside or I can align it outside. If I align it outside, I don't really have control over the actual size of the object, because the size does not reflect the actual size of the outline. If I put it inside, it reflects the actual size of the outline itself. Now now that you know that, let me go ahead and tell you a couple of more options that you need to know. As you know, I just changed transparency of the object a while ago, and I showed you exactly how you can make the entire object transparent. In Illustrator, you don't have to make the entire object transparent. You can actually go ahead and make only either the stroke or the fill transparent. The way you can do that is in the Appearance tab. As you can see, you have the fill and the stroke options available here, and each one of them has opacity under it set to default. I can go ahead and tell that the fill opacity, I want the fill opacity to be, let's say, only 10%. So now the fill is completely low. Okay, it's too low, it can't be seen, so let me set it at 60%. So as you can see, the fill is very low and stroke is completely opaque. I can go ahead and set the opacity of the entire object back from screen, to normal, so you can see exactly what's going on. You can see the stroke is completely opaque, it is not at all changing, whereas a fill is letting you see through the entire object itself. So similarly, I can do the same thing with the stroke. So you can just do this. So now the stroke is supposed to be transparent, and okay, so as you can see, the stroke is now transparent, and I can set the fill to be not transparent. So the stroke is going in and out, and where it's going inside, it's transparent on the fill itself, and it's going over the object too. So when you're doing web graphics or any kind of logo development, you can leverage these features to make sure it looks exactly the same way in any medium. So that was basically the object, how to create different objects using the Shift and Alt shortcuts and filling and outlines on the same object. Okay, so now next let me go ahead and show you how exactly you can manipulate the shape of different objects. Let us say that I wanted to create a simple cutout of two spheres in which I have this blue sphere which is exactly shown without this section which is being covered by this cyan sphere over here. So to any kind of these shape edit operations, basically using cookie cutters, all these options are available in the Pathfinder. So let's go ahead to the Window tab over here and find the Pathfinder. And as you can see, this is another panel which just opened up. These can be docked by just simply dragging in anywhere, and it creates this blue line, leave it, and it's docked. As you can see, these are only a few of the panels which are open currently, and if you go to the window, you can see a lot of options which are usually available. So now let us say I want these two to be cut out. I basically want this outer object which is on the top to cut out the one at the back. So to do any cutting operations, I can just select them, and over here in the Pathfinder I can just tell minus front. Basically what it does is take the front object and subtracts the back object. So clicking it, you can see it directly creates this cut. Now if I go back to my layers, you can see that it created a new path, and this section of it is completely gone, right? So similarly, I can go ahead. Okay, I basically deleted it completely. So let me go ahead, create new objects. I'll fill it with the similar colors. Okay, now let's say instead that you wanted both of these objects combined. In such a case, I can use combine operation, and it combines both of these objects together. Similarly, let's say I wanted them to intersect. Basically give me only the exact portion where both of them overlapped. So that gives me intersection over here. Apart from that, you have reverse intersect, or what is it called, exclude. If I click on this, it gives me all the portion which is not being overlapped by both of these two objects. So these are the different ways you can basically work with two objects. There are other options here at the bottom which are basically variations of the same. So the first option here basically creates intersection of both the objects using both intersect and exclude. So if I click divide, you can see it created this. Okay, it created a group here for me in the section. So let me just show you the different groups I have, different objects I have in the group. I basically have these three objects now. So all these three objects created in one single stroke. So that was divide, and then I have trim, which basically does the same operation as this minus front right now, because it is basically sitting on the front. So what this did is subtract the front from the back. So if you have several objects sitting on top of each other, and you have something which is being cut off in the view, and you don't know what exactly is happening in the background, and you don't care, this is the option you have to go for. I am planning to create a simple video on textile designing, because I had worked into textile design a couple of months ago, so I think this option will be quite useful for people who are coming in from that field. So I'll just go ahead and create a video on that later on. Now that was trim. Now apart from that, I have this merge option, which when I click, okay, this basically does not show you what happened. Let me go ahead and create another object. So now if I select all of these objects and click merge, you can see all of them go into a single group. But now this last object which was being overlapped is basically cookie cut. So this is a merge option. It works exactly like trim, but it creates a single object and groups it all for me in one shot. Okay, apart from that, I have intersect or crop. I click on it, and the last object I had selected is the one which is going to be kept, and it's going to basically going to create a clipping mask for me. So that is there, and this is the outline section. If I click on this, all the outlines get separated out, so I can go ahead and okay, you can see that from that time I've been going ahead and clicking all these objects within the group. I'm not able to select the group itself over here. This group can easily be ungrouped by going to Object, Ungroup. Control Shift G is a simple shortcut. If I do ungroup, I can go ahead and select different objects individually, and as you can see, using this outline option basically split out each and every single outline I have in those objects which are intersecting. Quite a useful feature. Now apart from that, I have the last option, which is minus back, which basically goes ahead, does exactly what this minus front does, but in reverse. So whatever is in the back goes and subtracts the front. So if you have two objects which are in reverse order and you want to use this minus front option, but you don't want to reorder them, this is the option you had to go for. So that was a pathfinder, and those were the different options that pathfinder gives you. Let me just show you a couple of options which are related to grouping. Now I have three different objects which I've just created, and I want them all grouped into a single object. Let's say it's a screwdriver, or it's a person's head, or anything that you have designed. I can just use Ctrl G and it groups them all into a single object. Now let's say I wanted to duplicate this object. I can go ahead, use Alt on my keyboard, and as you can see, when I press Alt, the arrow changes. I now have a black arrow and a white arrow. I can go ahead, duplicate this several times, so I have several groups. Now let me say I wanted to edit this particular group, and I wanted to edit one particular object within that group. I can obviously go to the layers, I can open up the group, I can select one object within the group. As you can see, clicking on any one of these circles selects a single object. If I click over here, it tries to select the entire group, whereas here it selects the individual. I can select it, and let's say I wanted to change the color. I can do that, but it kind of is laborious to go into the layers and try to do all that every single time. So instead, what I can do is select any group and just double click on it. So I've selected it, I'll double click, and as soon as I do that, you can see rest of all the objects in the entire layer are completely transparent now. Only this layer is opaque, and as you can see, I can actually select each object individually this time. So basically what I'm doing is gone into an isolation mode. So here, as you can see in the top, in the layer, I'm within the group. So basically I'm editing objects within the group. I can go ahead, do anything I want with these objects, and now once I've done these edits, I can tell I want to come back, and now I am back and the entire group is edited. I didn't have to go select different things or do none of those things. I can just go double click on an object, select, do what I want, come back, right? So that was isolating and grouping objects. Now apart from this, let's go ahead and talk about clipping masks. I'll delete all these objects. Okay, let's say I have this object, this particular sphere, and I have another square, this rectangle. Now what I want to do is I basically want this sphere to be seen only in places where this rectangle exists. I don't want the sphere to be seen anywhere else. Basically I want this rectangle to clip out everything about the sphere. So I can select the sphere and the rectangle, make sure the rectangle is in the front of everything. I can go to Object, and here at the bottom I have clipping mask. I can go just click make, and as soon as I do that, what you can see is this rectangle exists and the sphere is put inside the rectangle and it's being clipped out. And as you can see in the layers, it tells me I have a clip group, and you can see clipping path exists, which is basically my actual rectangle, and my path exists, which is basically my actual path which I had. Now let us say I want to add an additional object into this clipping mask. I can go ahead, create any object I want, and I can directly drag it and put it below the clipping mask, and as you can see, it's being clipped too. So it's easy ways of clipping different objects or attributes just using this option. But exactly how might you be able to use this? Let's say for example you're doing any kind of you have some images in your scene, like you're doing a magazine layout. You want the entire image to be clipped out exactly to the bounds. You can use clipping masks and put the image inside the rectangle or the page layout. So that's the easiest way of using it. Now similarly, let's look at one last very important thing when you're trying to edit objects and the look of objects, and that is adding effects. So if you have an object, you can add different effects to it in Illustrator. Unlike Corel Draw or other packages, the effects which you apply in Illustrator, I really love them for the speed. And even though you have applied a lot of effects on the single object, Illustrator usually does not crash. It does crash, but usually does not. So I really love the effects. So there are a couple of main effects which I want to show. Well, first one is the blur effect, which I'm going to make use of a lot when I'm going to show you other techniques. So the main one I'm going to use is the Gaussian blur. This is the default blur which you usually use in Photoshop. So you can set any value, you can hit preview, and you can see the vector object is actually getting blurred. So this is an actual vector object which is blurred, and I'm not sure about you, but that just is amazing if you can think about it. I can go ahead and actually edit the shape of this object, and this actually completely updates the blur, and it still exists. So you can see it's an interactive effect. If you want to go ahead and edit the effect once more, you can go to the Appearance tab, and you can see the Gaussian blur exists inside this as an effects. I can click on this, I can re-edit the effect and close it off, and the effect is updated. So similarly, you can go ahead and keep changing options. Also, you can see that it has eye options, just like you can have visibility options, just like you have in layers. You can turn it on and off quite easily. Make sure the object is selected when you do it. You can turn on and off the options quite easily. Not only this, in the Appearance tab, you can go ahead and add anything you want additionally. Like let's say you wanted an additional layer of fill, you can add another layer of fill. So it's quite easy to do all this. So let's go ahead and close that out. So that was the blurring effect. I'll just show you two more effects, the ones which I use most of the times, which is drop shadow. We always tend to use drop shadow a lot, I guess. Okay, so let me go ahead and increase the values for this. For Illustrator, one thing you can do is in any input box wherever you have, you can use a scroll mouse to go ahead and change the values interactively, or you can use a shift and scroll to change the values tenfolds, so it's easier to see the effects. And because I have a very large scene scale, because it's in pixels, it's a very high number, it's kind of slow. It tends to get slow when you're trying to overload the system. So try to just know exactly what values you need to give. So you can see, as you can see, I just added in this drop shadow effect. I can go ahead and just select the drop shadow and delete if I want. Next, one last effect I want to show is warp. You can see there are several warp effects available here. I'll just go ahead and let's say I want to give the flag effect. I can go hit preview to see exactly the kind of effect I'm going to get. I can set the amount of value I want, and once I like the actual value, I am done. If I want to go ahead and actually edit the shape once more, I can do that too. I can edit the shape, and as you can see, the flag actually gets updated. So it basically means this rectangle which is skewed up is the one which is actually being waved about. So it's quite a useful effect feature. So that was the warp flag. So like this, you have several effects. You can go through them, look at whatever you want exactly at that particular time and use them. Apart from this, if you go online and search for Illustrator scripts, there are several scripts that people have created which you can load in from using other script options over here, and you can pretty much get any kind of effects you want basically inside there. Another thing I want to show you right now is actions in Illustrator, where you can go ahead and create a custom set of options so that you don't have to go ahead and keep redoing them. So as you can see, there are loads of actions which are pre-done for you. So these are already present. These are the presets. So if I have an object, I can just put it in, and let's say that I have this option for opacity 60 selected. So what does it do? It goes to transparency and sets opacity to 60. Just double clicking on just clicking on this and telling play basically sets my object to that % opacity. Or I can tell I want it to be opacity 40 with screen. I can hit play, and immediately you can see the opacity of the object is set to 40 and it has a blend mode of screen. So similarly, I can go to any one of these and use the same settings. So let's say, for example, I wanted to reflect it horizontally. So play, it's immediately reflected horizontally. So it's harder to see with this. Let me go ahead and rotate this object. and play. As you can see, it's reflected horizontally, just flipped. So like that, you can go ahead and even record your own settings. So let's say I wanted to record one in which I wanted to remove all the stroke options and all the opacity and all other options in this entire section. So for this, I can go ahead and tell opacity I wanted 0, means 100% opacity. I don't want any transparency. I can go to stroke and tell I don't want any stroke. And for the fill, I'll tell I want it to be black, right? So I've done that, and I'll just tell stop. So now I have recorded this entire thing. So what exactly does it do? Okay, I basically overrid the reflect horizontal one. I should have created a new action. It does not matter because I'm anyway not going to use it anymore. So let me just see what happens. First, a reflection is set, and then it's going to go to transparency, set it to 100% opacity. It's going to set the stroke color. It's going to go to appearance and remove the stroke item. It's going to go set fill color, and in the swatches it's going to go apply a black swatch, right? So all these options are supposed to be applied. So let me go ahead, select star. So this one, I'm just going to set it a different angle. I'm going to apply a particular color. I'm going to go set it to a yellow stroke of, let's say, 20 pixels, and I'm going to give it an opacity of 30. So I've done all these options. Now if I go to reflect horizontal and play this, you can see it reflected, it went up, it did all of my options. Obviously the stroke was not applied. Okay, it basically didn't go there. So you can just go ahead, see exactly what's happening, and try to edit the whole thing. It basically automates a lot of things and helps you out. So that was actions. Now at last I come to one of the most important tools in Illustrator, which is the pen tool. Most of the people are actually scared of using this tool. I'm not exactly sure why, because it basically gives you every single thing you need to have in a particular node. So let me go ahead and show you this. This pen tool basically works by giving you loads of options. So let me just show you a few. You can go ahead and click and create any polygon shape you want directly, and any options you had already set on the object are what is going to be applied on this object when you're creating them. So if you want to set any different options, you can go ahead and set that too. Now what I basically want to do is let's say I want to create a mango. So I want to do a stylized mango design. So I'm going to go ahead, just click and go ahead and start designing this. So as you can see, it's not going okay, basically whatever I have in my mind, it's not going according to plan. Okay, let's say I have this. As you can see, it's not exactly true to whatever image or whatever I had in my mind. So I want to go ahead and edit this shape. You can't directly use the pen tool itself to edit the shape. For this, you need the selection or the direct selection tool. It goes ahead and helps you select the nodes themselves. So I can go ahead, select the nodes, move them about, change the shape, change a couple of the curve attributes, and try to get a pleasing shape, kind of shape which I actually like. So as you can see, I'm trying to reform the shape. It's turning out to be a bit better. It looks a bit more aesthetic. Okay, let's say I just want it to be such, and that I'm not going to edit it anymore. So I created this shape. As you can see, it took me a couple of steps. It was not as quick as it was supposed to be. So in such a case, what I can actually do is make use of a couple of shortcuts within Illustrator. So I'm going to show you one of those shortcuts. So if you have two tools selected, like let's say I'm going to click the type tool, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on the pencil tool. If I press Control on my keyboard, you can see I immediately shift over to the previous tool. Okay, let me tell direct selection tool instead, and the star tool. So now when I'm in the star tool, you can see here at the bottom it shows me what exact tool I'm working with. If it's not, you can go click on the arrow, show and tell current tool. By clicking the control arrow, you can see it goes back to direct selection tool. So even though I'm in the particular tool, by just using control, I go back to selection tool. So I'm going to make use of this option. So using the pen tool, I can go ahead and start drawing something. So let me go ahead, I'll just click and drag. By using shift, I can constrain the angles. So I'm just going to constrain it horizontally. and then I can click and drag. And now let's say I didn't like the way it came. I can go ahead to this point and try to re-edit the shape using the pen tool itself, but I can't really move the point using the pen tool. So in such a case, I can use this option of control clicking and moving the point where I want, or if I want, I can even change the shape itself. And now I can go ahead, click and drag the next point, and as you can see, it's not correct again. So I can go change the options, try to get it better. It becomes quite easy once or twice you work with it. Okay, so after all of this, the only edit I have is supposed to be this. So basically this is a textile mango. I'm not trying to replicate any actual mangoes which you might have seen. So you can see I can easily get any kind of shape I really want. So that was one. So let me just go ahead, randomly create shapes and show you a few more options. So let's say I have this shape, and now I wanted to remove one particular node. By being in the pen tool itself, if I come to any point, you can see that the tool changes. It has a minus sign below it now. By clicking on any node, it deletes the node. It's quite easy. If I go to the path, any position in the path where there is no actual node itself, you can see it gives me a plus sign now. I can go click and it gives me an actual node now. If I want, I can go click and let go, and it has me there. Apart from this, if I use my Alt key, it gives me a separate tool, and this is called the Convert Point tool. You can go to the pen tool menu, and you can see it has a Convert Anchor Point tool. It has a Add Anchor Point tool and the Delete Anchor Point tool. Add Anchor Point tool is basically your pen tool when you're anywhere on the path, and Delete Anchor Point tool is when you're on top of a node with your pen tool itself. Convert Anchor Point tool goes ahead and converts the anchor point from a point, or you can go ahead, click and drag and convert it to a cusp or a smooth anchor point. So that's the basic. Apart from that, most of the other options here are quite self-explanatory. I'm just going to show you one last thing here, which is if you have used the pen tool, which is the pen tool, and let's say you only wanted the stroke, not the actual fill, I'll go ahead to the fill, remove that, I'll go to the stroke and apply a stroke to this. Now let's say you wanted a stylized stroke, you wanted different widths or different outline settings. For such, you have a special tool here called the width tool, and using this you can go ahead, pull out and create different widths at different locations. But remember that while creating this, it's better to have different anchor points so that you can get exactly the kind of results that you are looking for. So you can see just by using one single width, I can change the stroke value, stroke width value, and create different effects too. So that was creating that. Now I've shown you exactly how to create objects using different constraints. I've shown you how to use fill and stroke. I've shown you how to use opacity. I've shown you how to use effects. I've shown you how to use layers, groups, how to isolate objects. Now let me go ahead and actually show you the real boring but the most interesting part of the whole thing, most important part of the whole thing actually, which is the unit setup and how you had to set up your document before you actually start the whole thing. So if you're going to actually start creating a document in Illustrator, first thing is going to ask you is what is the exact size and what do you want to call it. So if you already have a name for your project, go ahead, call it that. If you know that your project is based on particular settings, like let's say it's for print, like for a magazine or something as such, you can go ahead, set it to let's say A4 size, which is the default print format here in India. So you can set that, and all the basic settings are there for you. Let's say instead of points you wanted inches for your entire settings. So as soon as you set that, you can see all the options are set for you. If you're in print medium, obviously you are going to set in some bleed amounts so that when the paper is cut, you don't lose any details. Apart from this, you also have some color settings. It's going to tell you exactly how you're going to work. Because this is supposed to be print medium, you can see it's automatically set to CMYK color mode. If I want to, let's say, work with web, you can see it sets to RGB color mode. and because most of the screen resolution for monitors is 72 dpi or 72 pixels, the display units, it's automatically set to that too. And you can see units is also pixels. So depending on what you're going to work on and what units you're supposed to use, make sure you set it up exactly the way you want over here. Let's say you have not set it exactly the way you wanted it. You've already created the document and now you really want to set it up. When you're in the normal select tool and you have not selected any objects, here at the top you have document setup. Click on this and it brings out a similar window where you can set up the bleed amount and the actual units you're going to use. Instead, let's say you want to actually edit the canvas itself which you created. That is called an artboard. You can go ahead and click edit artboard. What this does is gives you the artboard tool. Now in Illustrator, what you have to understand is basically you're working with this two different artboards. This outer one which you have, the outer outline which you can see when I have zoomed out completely, this is basically what you can call your desktop. This is like the top of your desk on which you're actually creating your artwork, like you're keeping pieces of paper and documents on top of this desk and actually working on top of it. And you have different papers on which you're working, so you can go ahead put papers anywhere you want to here. So this is actual entire canvas region or the desktop you have, and these are the artboards or these are the canvases you can create. So now this creates a particular problem for most people because it messes up their rulers, or it doesn't actually work with the rulers. So let me just show you exactly how to work with them. Now if I go ahead and turn on my rulers, which is basically going to views and rulers, Control R to get my rulers. Here you can see that it has some kind of a setup, and you can see that the 0 value and the 0 value here are kind of here at this corner of this page. If I go click on another page, you can see this value shift. Similarly, if I go select the artboard, you can see if whichever artboard I go to, it also has some kind of X and Y values to them. So there are completely different rulers being used for each artboard. Now when I select each canvas, the rulers which are being used are the local rulers for those canvases, and these rulers are basically the topmost corner of each one of these canvas. So if you really want to change the position of these, you can just go to the corner here, to the corner of the rulers, click and drag, and look at, just pay attention to the top and the side of the rulers here and here at the top. When I let go, you can see the 0 points have shifted now. Wherever I keep this is where the 0 points are, but it does not change that for any other canvases. So if I come to a different canvas, the 0 position is still exactly here at the corner. This is because each canvas has its own local set of rulers. So what exactly do you have to do if you want a global ruler, or what exact rulers or units are these canvases using themselves? To get that ruler, you can just click on the rulers here and change to global. And this is the actual ruler being used throughout, and you can see it is actually set to this corner here. Now if you set it somewhere else, this is going to be your global ruler settings, and changing it back to artboard rulers gives you back the local rulers. Okay, so that's enough about rulers. If you need it, I know if you just go through the video you would have understood it. If you did not understand it, don't worry about it, you don't have to care about it. Okay, so that was the rulers for global and local. Next, let's see grids, or how to use guides. When you're working with any kind of tracing or any kind of precise documentation or precise illustrations, you obviously have to use guides. So guides are basically these helping lines which you can create, on which you can snap and create objects using them. And to create these guides, all you have to do is go on top of one of the rulers and click and drag these guides out. So by going to the vertical ruler, you can actually get the vertical guide, and by going to the horizontal ruler, you get the horizontal guide. And by just bringing in the ruler, the guide from one of the horizontal menus, if you want to shift them to the vertical ruler, just press Alt and it shifts to the vertical ruler, vertical guide. So basically just using Alt changes the guideline orientation. So that is it. Next, apart from this, you can change the guides, change the grid line setup. So basically when you're working with any kind of, let's say, architectural plans, you don't have to do all kinds of architectural plans only in AutoCAD. You can actually do that in Illustrator too. it has all the options you need. So you can go to view and tell you want to actually show the grid. By clicking on this, you can see it shows you this grid, which is basically going through a particular set of pixels and giving you this value. The reason we use grids is, let's say for example I want to use a pen tool. I can go ahead and tell snap to grid, and now my pen is always going to keep snapping to the grid, and it gets me on the way to create quite geometric designs and drawings. So it's going to be quite accurate. So how exactly do you set this grid up? To edit them, you can go to edit, preferences, and here you have guides and grid. Here you can change the colors for your guidelines and the grid lines, but the most important thing you have to look for is this grid lines every how many pixels. So right now it's telling I want grid lines every 100 pixels, and I want 2 subdivisions, meaning I want one single grid between them. So let me remove subdivisions for a second and set it to 100 and click OK. So you can see this is 100 pixel grid lines. If I zoom in, you can see this grid line position is somewhere at around 18, and this is at around 118. So I exactly want it to start from 0. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and change this here to snap there, and also I'm going to change my global rulers to start from here. So as you can see, as soon as I change my global rulers, it is exactly set, and my grid is also going exactly. So that is done. It's going exactly at 100, but because of my 72 ppi I'm not able to see that. Okay, so that was a grid setup. Now if I'm going to go ahead and draw some objects in this grid, you can see it exactly keeps snapping within the grid, so it gives me quite precise measurements. I'm going to be making use of this while creating the logo. Okay, so pretty much those are the most important things I wanted to show you within Illustrator. I hope I covered everything. If you have any doubts, please put them in the comments, or I think my website with the forum section will pretty much be open by the time you see this video. So in such a case, the forum link will be available, and you can go ahead and post in any doubts you have over there. And most probably I'll create another video which is going to have all the things which I missed out in this one. So let me go ahead and just summarize everything that I've done till now. So first step, when you're going to go ahead and create a new document, go ahead and set your units properly. Make sure if you're working on the screen, like for web design or logo design or things which are basically going to be displayed on a monitor or on screens or projected, set it to RGB. If it's for print medium, go ahead set it to CMYK. If you're unsure, just go ahead and use a profile from inside here. Now once you have set that up, you have your rulers which you need to set up. You can change the different measurements you want to set for the rulers by just right clicking on them. The select tool is a black arrow over here. The direct selection tool is basically for changing shapes on objects. The pen tool is what you use to draw different shapes. So when you're using the pen tool, clicking and dragging creates smooth curves. Just clicking creates sharper curves. So just using the pen tool, you can use a lot of options. Now because I use the direct selection tool before using the pen tool, holding control on my keyboard gives me options to go ahead and change the shape on the fly while using the pen tool itself. The pen tool, while using it, if I go on any node, I get to remove the node, and if I go on any parts, I can go ahead and add an actual node on top of them. Now apart from that, I have convert anchor point tool, which is basically using my alt key on the keyboard while I'm on when I'm in the editing mode. And because my grid snapping is set up, I can't really use a lot of these options. So okay, apart from that, while you're creating any objects like a sphere, when you click and drag, you basically can use the shift key to make sure you're constrained to getting perfect perfect circles or squares or perfect stars. You can use alt key to make sure your center is going to be exactly where you click in the first point. And apart from that, if you use both of them together, control and shift, you can click and drag to get a perfect circle starting from the exact center where you started from. You have a pencil tool where you can use to just click and drag however you want. If you have a Wacom tablet and such, you can go ahead and use this. You also have a brush tool which you can use if you're going to use let's say something like a Wacom tablet. You can use pressure sensitivity to get different shapes and sizes and all such. You can go ahead and use the eraser tool too. Let me go ahead apply a color on this object. Okay, now when I just applied the color on the object, the stroke was active, so that's why I used X on the keyboard to switch it to fill and give a different value. I can go ahead, use the eraser and just erase through an object. As you can see, it's quite easy to get this kind of details done. Apart from that, I have the brush option. I can go ahead, create any kind of strokes. You can go ahead and add in any kind of values you want. If you want to test out the different options you have, you can change the layout from the default one which you have to painting, and this painting layout gives you all the options over here. You can go ahead, add in a couple of more brush libraries. You can see there are loads of those libraries and use them to get different details. So that's the brush. Yeah, default line segment tools and arc and spiral tools, the default stuff which you usually have. Also another tool which I think I've not mentioned of till now is the rotate and scale tool, quite useful ones. The select tool by default lets you select shapes and you can rotate the shape and you can actually scale them quite easily, but it does not have all the options which you would actually require from our default transform tool. So if you want to actually have all the options, just go ahead, take the rotate tool, and now you can click anywhere in the scene and actually rotate your objects. So let me go ahead and change the document values. I'll just tell simulate colored papers, so it's going to give me okay, it's not giving me the value which I'm looking for. Okay, anyway, I'm just going to put it out, and using the rotate, you can see I can easily rotate this object however I want. Now let's say I wanted to rotate it from this particular corner here. I can use my you can see that there is a cyan center mark here, that is a pivot point. I can put that anywhere I want by using my snapping. As you can see, I'm getting this path, and when I go to the anchor, I get this anchor snapping points. That is because of the smart guides. So I have that on, and I have smart snap to points on. So because of both of them, I'm able to snap it to different sections. So now that I've snapped it here by using the rotate tool, if I rotate, you can see that it rotates exactly from that point. Now most people who are into like precision drawings and such, you want the entire object to be rotated not randomly as such, but at an exact value. For such things, you can use shift value, and as you can see, when I'm rotating, it's giving me the value 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 135 degrees. So it's giving me 45-degree increments when I'm trying to rotate it. But let's say you didn't want to just rotate it as such, you wanted to duplicate it or some other options. In such a case, just Alt click and move the anchor point where you want, and immediately you get rotation options. You can turn on preview to see exactly where it goes and set what options you want here. So let's say I set it to angle of 10, and I can go ahead, just hit copy. So it just copied this object 10 degrees using that anchor point. Now if I want to repeat the same operation throughout, all I have to do is duplicate the transform. The shortcut for that is Control D, and if you want that, you can just go to transform, and here you can see transform again. Shortcut is Control D. Click on that. Control D gives you all of these objects. Quite a neat looking design, right? So I can go ahead and I'll just go ahead, set the outline to a particular color so I can easily see that, right? I'll just remove the grids so I can see this. Now such designs are quite easy to come by. So you have done that. Apart from this, most of you want precision transforms like I was telling. So in such a case, you can go to the window manager and turn on transform box, dialog box, and here you can get a lot of options. So let me just go ahead and open this up completely. By clicking on this, you can see I have some more options here at the bottom. If I select a new object now, I get different transform options. I have the X and Y positions for the object itself. Using this as a pivot point, I can set the reference point to any single position I want on the object. Next, I can tell what is the width and height of the object, precise width and height. Same options are available here at the top, but here now you have different angle controls. You can tell what exact angle you want the object rotated at, and then also you can shear the object. You can tell how much you want the object properly sheared. So such options which are not available here at the top. Apart from this, you can go ahead and tell align to pixel grid. This is quite useful when doing web design. So when I'm doing the Illustrator web design video, I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. Also, if you're going to, let's say this object which I have, if I'm going to scale it down, you can see the stroke is still the same size. The stroke did not scale down or up. So in such a situation, you can tell scale, strokes and effects. You can turn that on over there, and now if I scale it up, you can see the stroke has actually increased in scale. So if you're going to scale objects down or up, this is the option you want to use if you want to maintain the size of your actual strokes. So those are the main options I wanted to show. Okay, yes, so pretty much that does it, I guess. I've covered pretty much all the things I wanted to in this entire video. I was talking a little bit too fast, I know, the reason being that I didn't want the video to extend too long, and I want to cram in as much information as possible within this video so that people can get started using Illustrator quite easily. Now, if you have any kind of doubts, or if you have any kind of confusion, you can just go put them in the comments and I'll try to help you out with those. If you want to know more about any particular tools or techniques, even put those in there and I'll try to help you out. Apart from that, okay, so this was Illustrator Crash Course by Anand on EOS Acro. I hope you found this video useful, and goodbye.